I'm Abigail, 27, and 3 years ago, I should have died from a rare disease that attacked my body during college. When I needed them most, my parents walked away, leaving me to fight alone. Then last year, my grandmother passed and left me everything, a fortune no one knew she had. Suddenly, my parents reappeared with a brother I never knew existed, hands outstretched for what they believed was rightfully theirs. They had no idea I'd already made my decision. Before I share how I sold it all and disappeared, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay for a lesson in creating your own justice. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, my childhood appeared picture-perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial, with its perfectly manicured lawn and white picket fence, was the embodiment of the American dream. My mother, Eleanor, commanded respect as the principal of Riverside Elementary School. Her hair always perfectly coiffed, her clothes impeccably pressed, she maintained the same exacting standards at home as she did at school. Students feared her stern glance. I craved her rare smiles of approval. My father, Raymond, worked as an executive at a large insurance company. He wore tailored suits, drove a luxury car, and spent most evenings secluded in his home office. While not physically affectionate, he provided well, and I was taught that material stability was his expression of love. I never questioned it. We only wanted one perfect child, my mother would say whenever anyone asked if they planned to have more children. Why dilute our attention when we can pour everything into making Abigail exceptional? I'd smile with pride, not recognizing the weight of expectation those words placed on my young shoulders. And exceptional I became. By 16, I maintained a 4.0 GPA, played first-chair piano in the school orchestra, captained the girls' soccer team to regional championships, and volunteered at the local hospital on weekends. Every achievement was methodically documented in a leather-bound portfolio my mother kept in the living room bookcase, evidence of their successful parenting displayed for visitors to admire. Each milestone came with conditional praise. This is what we expect from an Anderson, or now focus on maintaining this standard. There was always another mountain to climb, another expectation to fulfill. I learned early that love in our house was performance-based. Our family traditions seemed genuine enough. Sunday dinners were sacred. Phones away, formal dining room, cloth napkins. Summer vacations to Martha's Vineyard, where we'd rent the same beachfront cottage each July. Holiday photographs in coordinating outfits sent to relatives and business associates. I believed we were close because we occupied the same spaces at designated times, following well-rehearsed scripts of family harmony. My maternal grandmother, Margaret, lived 20 minutes away in the small Victorian house where my mother had grown up. Visiting her offered a different kind of family experience. In her cluttered, cozy living room with mismatched furniture and shelves overflowing with books, I could breathe. The piano there didn't have to be played perfectly. She encouraged improvisation. Cookies could be misshapen. Laughter could be loud. "You're wonderful exactly as you are, Abby," she'd say, using the nickname my parents considered too informal. With her, I didn't have to earn affection through achievement. During my teenage years, those Sunday afternoons at Grandma Margaret's became my sanctuary. When I received early acceptance to Westfield University, my parents' alma mater, the approval was almost overwhelming. For once, I had done something so right that even my father broke his stoic demeanor to boast to his colleagues. Mother organized a dinner party with their closest friends to celebrate. Our daughter, following in our footsteps, they said, clinking crystal glasses of champagne. As I packed for college that August, I felt genuine hope. This was my chance to step out of the perfect family portrait and discover who I might be beyond my parents' expectations. I hugged Grandma Margaret goodbye, promising to call regularly. "Remember, you're more than your achievements, Abby," she whispered. "College is for finding yourself." I nodded, not fully understanding her words. I was 18, healthy, accomplished, and headed to an elite university with my parents' blessing. In that moment, I truly believed my carefully constructed life would continue its upward trajectory. Independence beckoned, but I still craved my parents' approval. I had no idea that in less than 2 years, the facade of family would crumble, revealing the hollow core beneath the perfect exterior. Sophomore year at Westfield began brilliantly. After navigating the adjustment period of freshman year, I had found my rhythm. My double major in international business and economics put me on track for the corporate career my father envisioned. I joined the university symphony orchestra, made the dean's list, and secured a coveted position in the business leaders mentorship program. My parents received my accomplishments like investors seeing promising returns. The first symptoms were easy to dismiss. Unusual fatigue? Just the result of late-night studying. Joint pain? Probably from carrying heavy textbooks across campus. Frequent colds that lingered too long? The price of dorm living. I popped ibuprofen, drank extra coffee, and pushed through. Perfectionism had taught me that acknowledging weakness was failure. When my roommate Natalie suggested I visit the campus health center, I laughed it off. I don't have time to be sick, I told her, applying concealer to the dark circles under my eyes. The Anderson family motto might as well have been, mind over matter. I had midterms to ace and a piano recital to prepare for. The collapse happened during my advanced economic theory exam. 1 minute I was calculating fiscal multipliers, the next I was on the floor, my professor's concerned face swimming above me as classmates backed away in alarm. The campus medical center sent me directly to Massachusetts General Hospital. Your white blood cell count is concerning, the emergency room doctor said, ordering a battery of tests that required an overnight stay. One night turned into a week. Words like autoimmune, inflammatory markers, and systemic involvement floated around me as doctors consulted in hushed tones. My parents arrived looking appropriately concerned, my mother taking detailed notes during doctor consultations, my father asking about treatment timelines and success rates as if reviewing a business proposal. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday morning, granulomatosis with polyangiitis, a rare autoimmune disease causing inflammation of blood vessels. Without aggressive treatment, my major organs would slowly shut down. The rheumatologist, Dr. Franklin, explained the treatment protocol. A combination of specialized immunosuppressants, plasmapheresis, and lengthy hospitalization. Most insurance plans don't fully cover the specialized treatments, he explained gently. But there are financial assistance programs we can explore. My father nodded stoically. We'll figure it out, he said, squeezing my hand in a rare gesture of affection that made my eyes well with tears. My mother promised to research everything about the disease, already making lists of specialists and alternative treatments. For 2 weeks, they visited daily. Mother brought healthy meals prepared to boost my immune system. Father arranged for my professors to send coursework so I wouldn't fall behind. They seemed determined to approach my illness like any other challenge, something to be overcome with proper planning and resources. Then came the meeting with the hospital financial counselor. My student health insurance would cover only 30% of the recommended treatments. The remaining cost was staggering, more than a year's college tuition. I called my parents from my hospital room that evening, the phone shaking in my hand. The specialist treatment isn't covered, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. I need help with the medical bills if I want to have the best chance at remission. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. That's a significant amount, my father finally said, his voice tight. Have they discussed alternative treatments? Something more standard. The standard protocols have lower success rates with my specific antibody profile, I replied, repeating Dr. Franklin's explanation. This is my best chance. My mother spoke next, her voice taking on the practical tone she used when delivering difficult news to parents at school. Perhaps you should take a medical leave from university. We could look at less expensive treatment options while you recover at home. Something in their tone made my stomach clench with unease. These were not the responses of parents willing to move mountains for their child's health. These were the calculated reactions of people weighing costs against benefits. Over the next few weeks, their visits became less frequent. Phone calls went unanswered or returned days later with brief apologies about being swamped at work. When they did visit, conversation focused on when I might return to school rather than my treatment progress. The final devastating call came a month after my diagnosis. I had been discharged to a small apartment near the hospital for outpatient treatment, struggling to manage both my health and the mounting medical bills. "We've been discussing your situation," my father said, his voice businesslike. "And we've made a difficult decision. We simply can't sacrifice everything we've worked for, our retirement, our financial security, for treatments with no guaranteed outcome." The words hit like physical blows. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "We'll help with your living expenses while you recover, but we can't take on unlimited medical debt. Perhaps when you're stronger, you can return to school on a part-time basis and work to cover the treatments yourself." I remember staring at the phone after they hung up, unable to process what had just happened. My perfect parents, who had demanded perfection from me my entire life, had decided I wasn't worth the investment now that I was damaged. The realization was more painful than any symptom of my disease. Within weeks, even the promised living expenses stopped coming. Calls went straight to voicemail. Emails received automated responses about busy schedules. By the time I was forced to withdraw from university due to medical and financial hardship, my parents had effectively vanished from my life. Their perfect daughter was now a liability they couldn't afford to maintain. With my academic career derailed and my health deteriorating, I moved into the cheapest apartment I could find, a studio with peeling paint and unreliable heating in a neighborhood my parents would never have approved of. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those years of preparation for success had never included contingency plans for abandonment. My new reality revolved around two priorities: staying alive and keeping a roof over my head. I applied for every medical assistance program available, spending hours in government office waiting rooms, filling out forms, providing documentation of my condition and financial situation. The bureaucracy moved painfully slowly while my health declined rapidly. Some college friends tried to help initially. Natalie organized a fundraiser that covered one round of treatments. Jessica brought groceries when she could. But eventually their own lives, classes, internships, normal college experiences pulled them away. I couldn't blame them. We were 20 years old, and I had become a reminder of how quickly life could derail. Grandma Margaret was my lifeline during those dark months. Though living on a modest pension herself, she sent what money she could spare. "I wish it could be more, Abby," she'd say during our weekly phone calls, her voice tight with worry and what I suspected was anger toward her own daughter for abandoning me. I found work where I could, data entry I could do from home when my joints weren't too swollen to type, evening shifts answering phones at a local law firm, weekend hours at a bookstore that didn't mind if I occasionally needed to sit. None paid particularly well, but together they barely covered rent and utilities. My medical treatments became increasingly sporadic as I prioritized immediate survival over long-term health. The collection calls began 6 months after my diagnosis. Hospital billing departments, specialty pharmacy services, laboratory fees, all demanding payment for the treatments, keeping me alive. I developed a system. Monday calls went unanswered. Tuesday, I would negotiate partial payments. Wednesday, I would cry. The physical toll was relentless. Without consistent treatment, my condition flared unpredictably. Some mornings I couldn't lift my arms to brush my hair. Some nights fever kept me shivering despite multiple blankets. I learned to function through pain that would have previously sent me to an emergency room, now a luxury I couldn't afford. 9 months after my diagnosis, I made the devastating choice to skip my medications for 2 weeks to pay rent. The decision nearly killed me. I collapsed in my apartment bathroom, discovered only because my elderly neighbor heard the fall and called the building manager. I woke up in the hospital, alone except for an impatient resident asking about my next of kin. "There's no one," I whispered, the admission burning my throat more than the breathing tube they'd just removed. That night, staring at the hospital ceiling, I reached my lowest point. The disease was winning. My parents had abandoned me. My friends had moved on. I had no money, deteriorating health, and mounting debt. For the first time, I wondered if continuing to fight was worth it. What was I struggling so hard to preserve? A life of constant pain and poverty? The next morning, A nurse named Sophia came to check my vitals. Unlike the others who moved efficiently and impersonally through their tasks, she sat on the edge of my bed. "You've been crying," she observed, handing me a tissue. Something about her gentle directness broke through my carefully constructed walls. The story poured out. My parents' abandonment, my financial struggles, my increasing hopelessness. Sophia listened without interruption, then squeezed my hand. "You need more than medical treatment. You need community." She wrote down a number. "This is for a support group for young adults with chronic illnesses. And this," she added another number, "is my cell phone. Use it." That conversation marked the beginning of my rebuild. The support group introduced me to people who understood the unique challenges of being chronically ill in your 20s. Rachel, who had lupus, helped me navigate disability benefits I didn't know I qualified for. Tyler, recovering from cancer treatment, connected me with a pharmaceutical assistance program that provided my medications at minimal cost. Marcus, who had the same rare condition as me, shared management techniques his specialists had recommended. These people, strangers united by illness, became my chosen family. We celebrated treatment milestones together. We accompanied each other to difficult appointments. We created meal trains when one of us was too sick to cook. We understood each other's reality in ways healthy people, however well-meaning, simply couldn't. With proper medical support and a genuine support system, my health began to stabilize. Not cure, my condition was chronic but manageable. The constant crisis mode I'd been living in gradually gave way to a new normal. Sophia, true to her word, remained in my life, checking in regularly and eventually helping me secure a part-time administrative position at the hospital that accommodated my health needs and provided employee health benefits. The salary was modest, but the insurance was life-changing. 2 years after my diagnosis, I applied to return to college. Not Westfield with its pressure and painful memories, but a state university with a robust disability services department and flexible remote learning options. A scholarship for students with medical hardships covered most of my tuition. I switched my major from my parents' choice of business to healthcare administration, finding purpose in understanding the system that had both failed and saved me. The Abigail who re-entered college was fundamentally different from the achievement-oriented perfectionist who had left. My priorities had shifted from earning approval to creating a sustainable life. I measured success not by grades or accolades, but by my ability to manage my health while moving forward. The future looked different than I had once imagined, smaller in some ways, richer in others, but it was mine, shaped by my values, not those imposed upon me. The call came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon as I was reviewing notes for a healthcare ethics midterm. Grandma Margaret had suffered a massive stroke and was in the intensive care unit. Despite my own health considerations, I threw essentials into a backpack and caught the next bus to Massachusetts General Hospital, the same facility where my own medical journey had begun 3 years earlier. I found her diminished in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors creating a technological cocoon around her small frame. The nurse told me she had been unresponsive since admission, but when I took her hand and said, "I'm here, Grandma," her fingers tightened slightly around mine. For 3 days, I barely left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, speaking to her about my life, my studies, my slow journey toward health and independence. On the 3rd night, she opened her eyes briefly. "Abby," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'm right here." I leaned closer. "Promise me, you'll live true," she whispered.
"No masks.
"No performing." "I promise," I said, tears streaming down my face. "So proud of your strength," she managed before slipping back into unconsciousness. She passed peacefully the next morning, her hand in mine. The grief was overwhelming, not just for her loss, but for all she had represented in my life. Unconditional love, acceptance, safety. She had been my one true family connection, and now she was gone. The funeral was small and intimate, held at the local Episcopal church she had attended for 40 years. I arranged everything with the help of her longtime neighbors and friends from her bridge club. Throughout the service, I kept expecting my parents to appear, Surely they would come for their own mother's funeral, but they never did. Their absence spoke volumes about the people they had become, or perhaps had always been. After the service, an older gentleman in a well-worn suit approached me. "I'm Walter Simmons, your grandmother's attorney," he explained, handing me his card. "Margaret asked that I speak with you after the service. Could you come by my office tomorrow?" I arrived at his modest downtown office expecting a brief meeting about funeral expenses or perhaps a small bequest, a keepsake or sentimental item. Instead, Walter invited me to sit in a comfortable chair and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he began, "and much more private than most people realized." He opened the folder to reveal Margaret's will and various financial documents. "She has left her entire estate to you, Abigail, and it's substantial." My confusion must have been evident because Walter continued, "Your grandmother was an extremely successful investor. She lived simply by choice, not necessity." The details unfolded like a fairy tale. The Victorian house I had loved visiting was fully paid for and worth nearly $1 million in the current market. There were investment accounts, stock portfolios, savings bonds, all meticulously maintained and grown over decades. My grandmother, who wore the same cardigan for years and clipped coupons for groceries, had left me an inheritance worth over $5 million. "She never told anyone," I whispered, stunned. Walter handed me a sealed envelope. "She left this for you as well." Alone that evening in the bedroom that had always been mine in my grandmother's house, I carefully opened her letter. "My dearest Abby," it began in her familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this, I've left this world, but I hope not before seeing you reclaim your life after your illness. The money and property are now yours, with no conditions or expectations. Unlike the love you received from your parents. I kept my financial situation private for a reason. Money reveals people's true nature. Your mother became status-conscious and materialistic despite my attempts to instill different values. I watched with heartbreak as she and your father raised you to perform rather than live. When they abandoned you in your time of need, I wanted to help more but knew that revealing my resources would bring them circling back not out of love for you, but for access to wealth. I chose instead to support you in smaller ways while watching you build genuine strength and discover what truly matters. Use this inheritance however brings you peace and purpose. Remember that wealth is a tool, not a measure of worth. You've already proven your value through your resilience. All my love, always, Grandma Margaret." The tears flowed freely as her words confirmed what I had gradually come to understand. My parents' love had always been conditional, while hers had been absolute. Over the next few months, I settled into my grandmother's house, now my house. Each room held memories of warmth and acceptance. I took a leave of absence from university to manage the inheritance and process my grief. Walter helped me navigate the legal complexities of my new financial reality, setting up trusts and investment structures. My first priority was medical security. I established a health trust that would cover my treatments regardless of insurance changes or employment status. For the first time since my diagnosis, I could access the full recommended treatment protocol without financial constraints. The improvement in my health was remarkable. Not a cure, but better management than I had thought possible. With my health stabilizing, I turned my attention outward. The support community that had saved me during my darkest days had shown me how many young adults with chronic illnesses struggled without resources. Working with Walter and healthcare advisors, I established the Margaret Wilson Foundation for Young Adults with Autoimmune Diseases, providing financial assistance for treatments, housing subsidies, and educational support. The foundation work brought unexpected media attention. A local newspaper ran a feature on our first grant recipients, which was picked up by national outlets looking for positive healthcare stories. I gave interviews focusing on the gaps in support for young adults with chronic illnesses, carefully avoiding details about my personal family situation. By the one-year anniversary of my grandmother's passing, I had found a new purpose emerging from grief and illness. My foundation was helping dozens of young people receive treatments they couldn't otherwise afford. I had returned to my healthcare administration studies part-time. The inheritance had given me security, but the experience of building something meaningful from my suffering had given me purpose. I never expected that the media coverage would also bring my past crashing back into my present. But that's exactly what happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning when my doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house as I reviewed grant applications at my grandmother's antique desk, now my desk. I wasn't expecting visitors. The foundation staff knew I worked from home Tuesdays, and friends always texted before stopping by, understanding that my energy needed careful management. Through the stained glass panels flanking the front door, I could make out two tall figures and a shorter one. Probably someone canvassing for donations or selling something, I thought, setting aside my reading glasses. I pulled open the heavy oak door and felt the world tilt beneath my feet. My parents stood on the porch, looking oddly unchanged after 5 years of absence. Mother's hair was still perfectly styled, though with more gray than I remembered. Father still stood ramrod straight in a business casual outfit that looked freshly pressed. But it was the third person who made my breath catch. A young man around 19, with familiar eyes that mirrored my own. "Abigail," my mother said, her voice warm as though we'd spoken yesterday. "You look wonderful." I gripped the doorframe for support, unable to form words. "May we come in?" my father asked, already moving forward slightly. "It's been too long." Shock propelled me through the motions of hospitality. I stepped aside, letting them enter the foyer of the house they had visited countless times when my grandmother was alive. The young man entered last, offering an awkward smile. "This is Ethan," my mother said, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Your brother." Brother. The word echoed strangely in my mind. In my 27 years, I had never had a sibling. I had been the only perfect child they wanted. "We've been trying to find you for some time," my father explained, looking around the familiar living room with calculating eyes. "When we saw the newspaper article about your foundation, we were so proud. And we realized we didn't even know how to reach you." The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. They hadn't tried to find me. They had my email, my phone number, the same ones I'd had when they abandoned me. The foundation website listed my grandmother's address as our headquarters. Finding me would have been trivial if they had wanted to. "I'll make coffee," I said, needing a moment alone to process their sudden appearance. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter and took deep breaths. 5 years of silence, and now they appeared the moment I had something they might want. Grandmother's warning about money revealing true character had never felt more prescient. When I returned with a tray of coffee, they had arranged themselves in the living room. Mother was examining the family photos I displayed, mostly pictures of me and Grandma Margaret throughout the years. "You have Grandma's house," Ethan observed, accepting a mug from me. "It looks the same as I remember from when I was little." I studied him openly for the first time. My brother. The timeline suddenly clicked into place. My mother would have been in the early stages of pregnancy when I was diagnosed. They had chosen their healthy unborn child over their sick daughter. "I didn't know about you," I said directly to Ethan. "They never told me I had a brother." His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Really?" "They told me you knew, but that you chose to leave the family during college. That you wanted independence." The casual cruelty of their lies struck me like a physical blow. They had erased my illness and their abandonment, recasting me as the villain who had walked away. "That's not what happened," I said quietly, looking directly at my parents. My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we remembered things differently. It was a confusing time for everyone." "We had a new baby," my mother added, as though this explained everything. "We had to focus on a healthy pregnancy and then raising Ethan. We always meant to reconnect once things settled down." 5 years was a long time for things to settle down. I said nothing, watching them exchange glances. The conversation continued in this surreal manner through dinner, which I prepared mechanically while they toured the house, exclaiming over improvements I'd made and family heirlooms they recognized. They asked carefully crafted questions about my foundation, my health, referred to only as your condition, my education. I provided minimal answers, watching their performance of concerned parents. Ethan seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my favorite books and music, sharing stories about his first year at community college studying computer science. Unlike our parents, his curiosity felt authentic, his discomfort with the situation evident in his nervous gestures. I found myself warming to him despite the circumstances. Over dessert, my father finally broached their true purpose. "We've been going through some financial difficulties," he said, setting down his fork precisely. "My company downsized last year, and I was caught in the reduction. The job market is challenging for executives my age," he continued. "We've had to significantly adjust our lifestyle." My mother nodded soberly. "We've had to sell the house. We're in a small apartment now." "When we saw the article about your foundation," my father continued, "we realized that families should support each other during difficult times." And there it was, the real reason for their sudden reappearance. "We're not asking for much," my mother added quickly. "Just a temporary loan to help us get back on our feet. Family supporting family, the way it should be." I noticed Ethan staring at his plate, clearly uncomfortable with their request. How much did he know about their plans? Was he an unwitting pawn or a willing participant in their scheme? After dinner, while my parents examined the antique china cabinet in the dining room, discussing its potential value in hushed tones, I found Ethan alone in the living room, looking at the photos. "Was I really never mentioned?" he asked quietly. "Never," I confirmed. "I learned about you today." He shook his head slowly. "They always said you were too busy with your important career to visit. That you called sometimes when I was at school or asleep." He looked up, his expression troubled. "I used to wait by the phone on holidays, hoping to talk to my big sister." The revelation of this additional cruelty made my chest ache. They had robbed both of us, me of a brother, him of a sister. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I would have been there for you if I'd known." That night, I offered them the guest rooms, claiming it was too late for them to drive back to their apartment. In reality, I wanted time to process and plan. As I prepared the rooms, I discovered my father in my grandmother's study, rifling through papers on my desk. "Looking for something?" I asked from the doorway. He straightened quickly. "Just admiring Margaret's old desk. Beautiful craftsmanship." Later, after everyone had retired, I found my financial folders had been disturbed, the most recent bank statements pulled to the front. The boundary violation confirmed what I already knew. They felt entitled to my inheritance. They weren't asking for a loan. They were asserting what they believed was their right to my grandmother's money. The confrontation came at breakfast. I placed the disturbed financial documents on the table between us. "You went through my private papers," I stated flatly. My father didn't deny it. We needed to understand the situation fully. After all, Margaret was my mother-in-law. "It's unusual that everything went to you with nothing for her own daughter." "She made her choices for a reason," I replied. "Were your parents?" my mother interjected, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used at school. "We raised you, provided for you, gave you every advantage. Now we're asking for help during a difficult time." "Where was your help during my difficult time?" I asked quietly. "When I was dying and you walked away?" My father's face hardened. "We had impossible choices to make. Eleanor was pregnant. We couldn't risk her health with the stress of your situation." "My situation," I repeated. "You mean when I was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease and you decided I wasn't worth saving?" "That's not fair," my mother snapped. "We did what we could." "You did nothing," I corrected. "You abandoned me when I needed you most. And now you're back because Grandma left me money." My father's facade of familial concern dropped completely. "We'll contest the will if necessary. Margaret wasn't in her right mind, leaving everything to you and nothing to her own daughter. The will was executed 3 years before her death," I replied calmly, "with full psychological evaluation and multiple witnesses. But feel free to try." My mother switched tactics, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. "Abigail, we're still your parents. We made mistakes, yes, but we're family. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at Ethan, who sat silently watching this exchange, his expression troubled. He, at least, deserved better than to be caught in their manipulation. "You can stay until tomorrow," I said finally. "I need time to think." That night, I barely slept, turning over options in my mind. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. At 7 a.m., I slipped out of the house while my family still slept and drove to Walter Simmons' office. He was surprised to see me without an appointment, but ushered me in immediately when he saw my expression. "My parents have reappeared," I explained, sinking into the chair across from his desk. "With a brother I never knew existed. They want my inheritance." Walter removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. "I was afraid this might happen if they learned about your financial situation. Margaret predicted it as well. They're threatening to contest the will." He smiled slightly. "They won't get far. Your grandmother was very thorough. But legal battles, even unsuccessful ones, can be draining financially and emotionally. I need to protect the inheritance, not just for me, but for the foundation and the people we help," I explained. "And I need to understand my brother's situation. He seems innocent in their scheme." For the next 2 hours, Walter and I developed a strategic plan. The will was ironclad, but that wouldn't stop my parents from causing problems. The solution wasn't legal but practical. Convert the assets to forms they couldn't easily challenge or access. "Give me a week," Walter advised. "Don't make any promises or commitments to them in the meantime." I returned home to find my parents in the kitchen, Ethan still upstairs sleeping. My mother had made coffee and was examining the contents of my refrigerator. "I've been thinking about your request," I said carefully. "I need some time to review my finances and talk to my advisors. Why don't you stay here while I sort things out? It must be cramped in your apartment." The relief on their faces was immediate. They interpreted my offer as capitulation, the first step toward accessing what they believed they deserved. "That's very thoughtful, dear," my mother said, patting my hand condescendingly. "I knew you'd understand family obligations once you had time to think." Over the next few days, I maintained a delicate balance, keeping my parents believing I was considering their request while moving forward with my plan. They settled into the house, making small suggestions about improvements and reminiscing about family heirlooms they had always admired. Meanwhile, I focused on connecting with Ethan. During a walk through the neighborhood, away from our parents' watchful eyes, I asked him directly about his life with them. "What was it like growing up as the only child?" I asked. He kicked a stone along the sidewalk. "Suffocating. Everything had to be perfect all the time. Dad mapped out my entire education path when I was 12. Mom controlled everything from my clothes to my friends." He glanced at me. "Was it the same for you?" "Exactly the same," I confirmed. "Perfect grades, perfect activities, perfect daughter on display. When I wanted to study computer graphics instead of business, Dad threatened to stop paying for college altogether." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "I'm at community college now because it's all I can afford on my own. They think I'm studying business administration." My heart ached for him. He had been trapped in the same performance-based family I had escaped through illness and abandonment. "They're using you too, you know," he said suddenly. "In this inheritance thing. They told me we were coming to reconnect with you, but I overheard them talking about Grandma's money and how they deserved it." The confirmation of their manipulation solidified my resolve. "Ethan, if you could do anything, study anything, what would it be?" "Digital animation," he answered without hesitation. "I want to create video games." I nodded, filing away this information for later. Working with Walter, I set my plan in motion. Each day, while my parents explored the area or made social calls to old friends, re-establishing their presence in town, I executed another piece of the strategy. The investment portfolios were liquidated and reinvested through different financial institutions. The house was quietly transferred to a trust that would convert it to the foundation's headquarters after my departure. The most valuable antiques and artworks were authenticated and documented, then sold to collectors through private sales. Each transaction was legal, documented, and designed to convert my inheritance into forms that couldn't be easily contested or claimed. Most importantly, I established an independent educational trust for Ethan, structured so our parents couldn't access it. The trust would provide full tuition and living expenses at any university with a digital arts program, plus a modest stipend for equipment and software. I arranged for him to be notified of its existence after my departure. For the foundation, I set up an anonymous donor account that would continue funding our work for years, regardless of my personal involvement. The staff were briefed about potential leadership transition, though not the details of why. By the time a week had passed, I had systematically converted or protected nearly every asset of value in my inheritance. All that remained was the final confrontation. I arranged a special dinner, telling my parents I was ready to discuss their loan request. I prepared my grandmother's signature pot roast, set the formal dining table with her best china, and opened an expensive bottle of wine. Before we discuss financial arrangements, I said as we finished the main course, I want to clarify something. You've indicated you believe you deserve a portion of Grandma's estate because she was your mother. I looked directly at my mother. That's right, she nodded. It's only natural that a mother would provide for her daughter. The way you provided for me when I was sick? I asked, my voice steady. My father's expression hardened. We've explained that situation. We had impossible choices. Actually, you had very simple choices. I corrected him. You chose your comfort over my life. You chose a healthy child over a sick one. You chose to lie to Ethan about me abandoning the family, when in fact, you abandoned me. My mother's face flushed with anger. We don't have to justify our decisions to you. We're still your parents. You stopped being my parents the day you decided I wasn't worth saving. I placed a folder on the table. This contains documentation of every communication after my diagnosis, your gradual withdrawal, your refusal to help with medical expenses, your complete disappearance from my life. I've had it notarized and filed with my attorney. My father reached for the folder, but I pulled it back. This isn't a negotiation. I'm informing you of facts. I know you went through my financial documents. I know you're planning to contest the will if I don't give you what you want. I know you see me as a means to restore your comfortable lifestyle. I stood up, looking between them. But what you don't know is that there's nothing left to contest. Their expressions of confusion were almost comical. The house has been transferred to the foundation. The investments have been liquidated and relocated. The valuable antiques have been sold to private collectors. There's nothing here for you to claim. The color drained from my father's face. You can't do that. It's Margaret's legacy. Yes, her legacy, not yours. She left everything to me without conditions, and I've chosen to protect it from people who abandoned me when I needed them most. My mother's shock turned to fury. You ungrateful, after everything we did for you. What exactly did you do for me? I interrupted. Raise me to perform like a trained seal for your approval? Disappear when I became inconvenient? Lie to my brother about my existence? Show up with your hands out the moment you learned I had resources you could use. Ethan had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke. Is it true? Did you really abandon Abigail when she was sick? My mother turned to him, composing her features into an expression of maternal concern. It wasn't like that, Ethan. We had you to think about. We had to make difficult choices. You chose, I said simply. And so have I. My father pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This isn't over. We'll talk to lawyers. We'll fight this. You're welcome to try, I replied calmly. Everything I've done is legal. But more importantly, it's just. Grandma wanted me to use her gift to create a meaningful life true to myself. That's exactly what I'm doing. I turned to Ethan. You didn't know about any of this, and you've been used as a pawn in their game. I've arranged something for you that they can't touch. Walter Simmons will contact you tomorrow with the details. My brother looked between us, confusion and hurt evident in his expression. Then, in a moment that would have seemed impossible a week earlier, he stood up and moved to stand beside me. I want to hear Abigail's side of the story, he said firmly. The whole story, not your version. My parents' faces registered the shock of losing control of both their children. My father recovered first, his expression hardening into cold fury. "You'll regret this," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Both of you." My mother followed him, pausing at the dining room doorway to deliver a final barb. "When your disease flares again and you're alone, don't come crying to us." After they stormed out, slamming the front door behind them, Ethan and I sat in the sudden silence of the dining room. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I didn't know." "Neither did I replied. "About you, I mean." We stayed up late that night, sharing our parallel yet separate experiences of our parents' conditional love and manipulation. When he finally went to bed, I finished packing the few personal items I planned to take with me. By morning, the plan I had set in motion was complete. My parents had no idea that while they slept in my guest rooms, plotting to claim my inheritance, I had systematically ensured there was nothing left for them to take. 1 year later, I sat on the balcony of my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the early summer sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and pink. Chicago had proven the perfect place to rebuild, a city large enough to disappear into, yet filled with excellent medical facilities for my ongoing health management. The physical healing had been more straightforward than the emotional. With proper treatment protocols fully funded through my health trust, my condition had stabilized into a manageable chronic illness rather than a progressive threat. I still had bad days when fatigue or pain limited my activities, but they were fewer and further between. The emotional healing was a more complex journey. Processing the layers of my parents' betrayal, first in my illness, then in their attempted manipulation of my inheritance, required professional help. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, specialized in family estrangement and chronic illness, helping me understand that my parents' behavior reflected their deficiencies, not mine. "Perfect parents don't create perfect children," she often reminded me. "They create authentic, resilient children. Your parents failed at that fundamental task." My brother Ethan had taken a bold step after our parents' dramatic exit that night. Using the educational trust one had established, he applied to the digital arts program at Columbia College Chicago and was accepted with a portfolio he had created in secret while supposedly studying business. He lived on campus, but we met weekly for dinner, gradually building the sibling relationship we had been denied. Through him, I learned that our parents had made a few initial attempts to legally challenge my grandmother's will but abandoned the effort when their lawyers confirmed Walter's assessment. The will was unassailable, and the assets had been legally relocated beyond their reach. "They talk about you like you're the villain in their story," Ethan told me during one of our dinners. But watching how they spin everything to make themselves the victims helped me see clearly for the first time. It's like once you notice the pattern, you can't unsee it. Through the foundation, which continued to thrive under new leadership, I made occasional anonymous donations to causes I cared about: medical research for rare autoimmune diseases, scholarship funds for chronically ill students, emergency housing for young adults displaced by health crises. The public face of Abigail Anderson, heiress and foundation founder, had effectively disappeared, allowing me to redirect my grandmother's legacy without attracting unwanted attention. Learning to trust again came slowly. The support community that had sustained me during my illness remained part of my life, though now I was often in a position to offer help rather than receive it. Rachel and I became particularly close, co-facilitating a support group for newly diagnosed young adults. Tyler, now in full remission from his cancer, became a volunteer patient advocate at the hospital where Sophia still worked as a nurse. These connections, formed during my darkest days, had evolved into something I had never experienced in my performance-based childhood: genuine relationships built on mutual care rather than conditional approval. I often reflected on my parents' choices and motivations. What made them value appearance over substance, control over connection? Had they been raised with the same conditional love they passed on to me? Their abandonment had nearly destroyed me, yet paradoxically, it had also freed me from the exhausting pursuit of their impossible standards. "Family is defined by love and support, not blood," my grandmother had often said. In the year since I had sold my inheritance and disappeared from my parents' radar, I had proven the wisdom of her words. My chosen family, Ethan, my support community, my healthcare team, my colleagues, provided the authentic connections my perfect-appearing family had never managed. The process of forgiveness wasn't for my parents' benefit, but for my own. Holding on to anger consumed energy I needed for healing. Gradually, I learned to acknowledge their failure without letting it define me. They had been unable to love unconditionally, but that didn't mean I was unworthy of such love. Without the pressure to maintain perfect grades, perfect activities, perfect appearances, I discovered aspects of myself that had been suppressed in my pursuit of approval. I enjoyed painting, badly, joyfully, with no concern for technique or outcome. I tried new foods without worrying about calorie counts or proper etiquette. I developed a meditation practice that helped manage both my stress levels and my autoimmune inflammation. Ethan and I created new traditions to replace the hollow performances of our childhood. Instead of formal holiday dinners with coordinated outfits and rehearsed conversations, we had movie marathons in pajamas. Rather than Martha's Vineyard vacations designed for social media perfection, we took spontaneous weekend trips to quirky small towns or nature preserves. My relationship with my brother evolved into one of my life's greatest unexpected gifts. We had both been damaged by our parents' conditional love, but together we were learning to define family on our own terms. The most profound lesson from my journey came not from what I had lost, but from what I had discovered. My own worth existed independent of others' valuation. My parents had seen me as an extension of themselves, a performance to be judged. My grandmother had seen me as inherently valuable, worthy of unconditional love and support. The difference between these perspectives had literally saved my life. As I watched the sun climb higher over Lake Michigan that morning, I reflected on my grandmother's final request. Live true.
No masks.
No performing. In honoring that promise, I had found a freedom that no inheritance could buy, the freedom to be authentically myself, imperfections and all. Ethan was coming for brunch later. He wanted to introduce me to his new girlfriend, a fellow digital art student who apparently made amazing blueberry pancakes. The simple joy of this ordinary event, a brother bringing someone special to meet his sister, was something neither of us had dared imagine a year ago. Whatever challenges my health might bring in the future, whatever new chapters might unfold, I faced them now from a foundation of self-worth and genuine connection that could never be taken away. The most valuable inheritance my grandmother had left me wasn't her financial wealth, but the example of her authentic life and unconditional love. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a major life betrayal? Did you choose to maintain connections with those who hurt you, or did you find the strength to walk away and create something new? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is realize we're not alone in our struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening to my journey. May it help you find courage in your own.